Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the CEO of MuellerFootball.com, host of the Football GM podcast, and the 2000 NFL Executive of the Year. Please welcome Randy Mueller to the program. Randy, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me to join you guys. Looking forward to a little visit.
Randy, have you ever seen a quarterback carousel like this before?
Pretty crazy, that's for sure. I think what should we expect in the year of COVID, you know? all kind of chaos. And, you know, the chaos, that's the position that really runs the league. That's what makes it intriguing for us all. So the answer to your question is no, I've not seen anything like it, and I'm not sure we will again.
Did you experience anything similar when you were a GM?
No, I've thought back about this several times, and I can't, you know, I cannot recall any time when these kind of chess pieces were even being talked about, much less being traded. We're talking about some of the best players in the league, and obviously at the highest profile position in the league. It's just crazy, the type of dynamics that one team will swallow to, you know, move a guy for whatever reason. I mean, you go back to what the Rams and Eagles have done with their quarterbacks, the amount of cap room that they've chewed up now in dead money with players that aren't on their team, it's, you know, obviously unprecedented. So I think that's the big thing going forward is used to be the cap would say, no chance. Now we're saying, well, maybe not no, but let's talk about it. You know, just the fact that we're even considering some of these moves, I think makes it unprecedented.
Why do you think that's changed? Like, what changed from your days to today to allow that stuff to happen?
I think cap economics has always been a little bit feared by football people. I think they have always wanted more accountability, and the cap kind of held us all accountable. I think now the cap and the ramifications that these two teams are going to find out, and two teams, I'm talking about the Rams and Eagles per se, because they're the ones that have set precedent here. It'll be interesting to follow them the next couple of years to see if this is a one-off or if this becomes a trend. I still think it's kind of in the one-off category. I just don't see teams willing to do this. The amount of cash that those teams laid out to those players that are gone, cap is one thing, but we all know cash is king. Cash to those teams just doesn't seem to mean as much as it does to some of the other market, mid-market teams. So we'll see. It sure makes for interesting observation and really a great science project going forward if we were kids, you know?
For those who don't know, what's the offseason like? How many phone calls did you make, and how'd you end up maneuvering some of the trades you did?
Well, my philosophy always was to be in the middle of every deal. Paul Allen told me that years ago in Seattle, and his people, once they bought our team in Seattle, they kind of said, hey, we like to be aggressive. We want to be involved in everything. We can always say no at the end of the deal. That was a license for me to really do my job, and I enjoyed it. I think this year is really crazy because it's more players available in a pool than ever before. So I would think that those phone calls are nonstop. They were when I was a GM. I mean, we always were on the phone spending time. I want to discuss everything because we're going to build consensus. Plus, I'm always going to answer the phone because I'm not dumb enough to think that other guys don't have great ideas. So I may not have all the ideas. So by talking to everybody, you kind of can expand your own mind and get somebody else's ideas and see if it doesn't work for you. So I would always be on the phone, as I'm sure these guys are today. I think a guy like Joe Douglas is in a fascinating spot with New York this year with the second pick and the amount of cap room he has. I can't imagine that he's got 20, 30, 40 deals in his mind at all times. I know I would. And that deal-making hat would be rolling. And I think they're kind of a test tube in this offseason. The Jets, I see no reason they can't be a playoff team. And if they're not, it's because they haven't done their homework and haven't done a good job retooling.
Would you say that's the most likely destination for Deshaun Watson right now?
No, because I don't think Deshaun's going to be traded. I've said that from day one, and I feel steadfast that that's not going to happen. I think they will sit on that deal, and if they did move him, I think they're a year away from moving him. That deal that he signed is going to prevent him I think, from putting down his foot because there are major financial ramifications, guarantees with the rest of his long-term contract that would all disappear if he doesn't play this year. So I think we'll see the pendulum slip back a little bit in the favor of the Texans if they indeed don't want to trade him. So I don't see that happening. I think the Jets are going to be involved in every deal. And the fascinating part of it is it starts with, do we keep Sam Darnold or do we keep the second pick and draft Zach Wilson? I think that's where it all starts for them.
Randy Mueller here on Sports Talk Chicago. So, Randy, what could the Bears do at quarterback right now? If Watson could be out of the question, do you buy the Russell Wilson hype?
I don't. Again, that's a deal where I think Russell's agent has been doing all the talking. I think Seattle has said they'll open, haven't said anything, but obviously their phone lines are open. But you're talking about a close to 70-year-old head coach in Seattle, in Pete Carroll. I just can't see the answer at quarterback for them appearing out of nowhere. And that's what it would take to trade Russell Wilson. I just don't think they're going to start over or even adjust. Pete Carroll's in the twilight, right? He might have 2 or 3 years left. I just don't see them moving off Russell Wilson. The Super Bowl window is open for them, and a trade of that magnitude would kind of take that window away, in my opinion, because there would definitely be a period of adjustment, and I don't know where they find another Russell Wilson. So I don't think that's real. I think the Bears can try to, produce a package in their own mind that might get their attention. If it's crazy enough, maybe John Snyder begs Pete to make a deal, but I just don't see that happen. I just don't think it's realistic.
How much is too much for Watson or Wilson?
Well, I've heard the rumors of the 3 first-round picks, and I think in Chicago's case, they're in a tough spot. They're going to make, some decisions now because of the status of the GM and the head coach, and they're going to make some desperate decisions. And I'm not sure that's good for the franchise in the long haul. I surely would take a call that included 3 first-round picks, I guess, but anything beyond that is kind of crazy, and that might be crazy in the end. But I don't see that being enough. So I guess they got to keep putting the package together and try to get somebody's attention.
Have you ever been in a position like this before, like in Brian Pace's case, doing everything he can to save his job and probably mortgaging a lot of the future just to stay in power?
Yeah, no, that's a tough spot. I do not envy Ryan, and I've known him since he was a kid. He was our intern in New Orleans when I was the GM, so I've known him since he even got into the league. He's definitely in a tough spot. I think they swung and missed on quarterbacks, and that's the risk you take when you make a bold move like he did on Trubisky, and then they even swung and missed, in my opinion, on Foles. So, maybe third strike is a charm, third time's a charm. I don't know. It's definitely a tough spot when your franchise is banking on every move you make. The agenda of the decision maker is definitely in the mix, and that puts him in a tough spot for sure.
How do you feel about Mitch Trubisky? Could he still find success in the NFL, do you think?
I think it's going to be hard. I think the system he would have to function in kind of limits the overall package that offense can run. And I felt like that's what kind of happened with the Bears. When they dialed things back and put it in his hands, it was like playing with one arm behind their back. And that made it really hard to function and spread the field. And NFL defenses are really good, right? They tend to find ways to combat offenses that aren't complete. And I felt like the Bears weren't a complete offense when he was in there. I just don't think that's an appetite that other teams are going to share, a liking for us. So maybe as a backup, I just don't see him as a starter next year. That's for sure.
What caused his downfall? Was it a lack of skill or bad coaching or both?
I think in his case, he's a great kid. I think the body of work at North Carolina wasn't very much. I think if you study that itself, he played behind a couple quarterbacks that were not NFL quarterbacks, and he didn't beat them out there. So I felt like that 1 year of work that he had, people saw the pluses. They didn't see the things that held him back. And I just don't think that there was a complete evaluation. Most teams didn't have him up where the Bears took him. Let me just say that. So, I think the evaluation process itself kind of led them astray. And that's a tough spot when you give up picks to get him, and that kind of money's involved. Makes for a tough marriage if all the skill set isn't there. I just didn't see a complete skill set with Mitch when he came out.
Would you have drafted him?
Oh, not where they picked him, that's for sure. I mean, gosh, I don't think I have to be a revisionist in history to tell you the two names of other quarterbacks that were in that draft as well. So I won't bring that up. But, yeah, we all liked Mitch. Don't get me wrong, but we didn't like him up there, that's for sure.
Where could he go if you had to guess? A certain team, either as a backup or maybe a starter?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a place like San Francisco where Kyle Shanahan does favor a little bit of an athletic quarterback who can make some things happen outside the pocket, but you've also still got to survive in the pocket. I could see him ending up at a place like that in a backup role for sure. Again, it's all about the system and the fit.
What about realistically for the Bears? What will they do come next season? Who's their quarterback going to be?
You know, I think they've got to continue to beat the bushes. They've got to shake every tree that's out there. I don't know what's going to happen with Jameis Winston. I think he's got a tough decision to make. Everybody says the Saints want him back, but that's in a position to compete with Taysom Hill. And we all know Sean Payton has kind of adopted Taysom Hill as his guy. So I don't know how Jameis trusts that situation. They also, the one I mentioned is what are the Jets going to do? I mean, they've got Sam Darnold sitting there. They've got a chance to draft a quarterback really high. I think that's a possibility. Where does Sam Darnold go? That I would think would have to interest the Bears. I had a chance to study Sam Darnold when he came out, and I've looked at a ton of film recently with the Jets, and I think I can explain his downfall. So for me, Sam Darnold is still a viable option.
What is his downfall?
I think a lot of it is the fact that at SC, he ran kind of an archaic system. It was not one that asked him to process a lot of information, didn't give him a lot of answers. At the Jets, that was a bad team the last couple of years. They're throwing to half of last season. He's throwing to neighbor kids, in my opinion. They just didn't have NFL players, so that makes it a hard way to develop when you don't have the skill sets around you. So I think in an offense that gives you more answers and with better players, he stands a good chance to show upside. I still watch tape on him, and there's 2 or 3 throws a game that I say, wow, Sam Darnold's got it. It's just not on a consistent basis.
But do you think the Bears could provide that with Matt Nagy and with the weapons they have right now?
Well, I haven't seen that. That's the tough spot.
Right.
I haven't seen that offense operate at a level that, hey, you want to go there for one as a quarterback, and two, what they've done defensively. I guess that's the biggest selling point they have is to sell the defense to a quarterback that might come in there. So I don't know. That's a tough spot, and I'm coming back to that several times in our discussion, but I'm just not sure about the Bears and their direction on offense. What if I'm buying or selling, you know?
Randy Mueller, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. And Randy, I wanted to also talk about your career for a moment. You started with the Seahawks before going to the Saints, Dolphins, Chargers, and the XFL too. Tell me about your journey through football and how you made it to where you are now.
Well, it was a fun journey, that's for sure. I hadn't given it a lot of thought. I grew up in a little logging town in northern Idaho, 2,000 people, and became one summer when I was in high school a ball boy for the Seahawks. And to wake up 17 or 18 years later as the boss was kind of a crazy period of time. I guess it's testament that if you keep your mouth shut and keep ducking behind your desk, pretty soon they got to keep you because you're doing all the dirty work. That's kind of how it worked out there. I stayed in Seattle when Mike Holmgren came from Green Bay. We won the division in Holmgren's first year in Seattle, and then went on to the Saints as their GM and Miami as the GM as well with Nick Saban. So I spent 10 years after that as the national scout for the Chargers. So it's been a good run for me. I've enjoyed it. I always say, hey, it beats working for a living, and it gave me 35 years in the NFL.
What initially got you into the front office? Why were you interested in it, and how'd you get in?
I really don't know that I'd given it a bunch of thought. I had worked for the Seahawks 3 or 4 summers when I graduated from college, and I had actually another year of eligibility to play. I went to a little school in Oregon, Linfield College, and my last year there, we'd won the national championship, and I was a starting quarterback, and I had planned on coming back another year because I had redshirted early in my career. But the Seahawks offered me a full-time job in scouting, and so I wasn't sure I wanted to do it until my head coach in college said, hey, everybody on my staff wants this job. You have to take it. So I ended up leaving and into a full-time job with the Seahawks as an assistant in the pro scouting department and just kind of learned the business from the ground up. I think that's the missing link in real business life anymore, right? Nobody starts at the bottom and learns it from the bottom up. And that's what I'm probably most proud of is that I kind of learned it the right way, and it's served me well throughout the last 3 or 4 decades.
What's the most memorable moment in your career?
Oh, I think the crowning moment for me was in Seattle. One year we had, and this kind of comes at Chicago's expense, we traded Rick Meyer to the Bears for a first-round pick, and we had, I believe it was picks either 9 and 10 or 10 and 11 in the first round, and I figured out a way to swap those 2 picks to go up to 3 to get Sean Springs and 6 to get Walter Jones in the same draft. So that was probably something I'll always be proud of. I think Walter Jones, by most standards, is maybe the best lineman to ever play. And Sean Springs was a Pro Bowl corner, and we got both those guys in one draft. And, I guess that would be rivaled with my first year in New Orleans when they were still wearing bags, and we turned their franchise around, really, and won our first playoff game in my first season there with Jim Haslett as the head coach. So those were fun times, that's for sure.
Can you tell me more about the Myra trade? How did you trade Myra for a first-round pick? How'd you do that?
Well, I think he was highly thought of coming out of Notre Dame. When they drafted him in Seattle, I really wasn't in charge, and that was the same year that Drew Bledsoe was picked at the top of the draft by the Patriots. So we picked Rick Meyer second, and Rick's skill set just didn't match up with Dennis Erickson's passing offense. And so we kind of, about halfway through that season, what was Rick's last, just decided we're going to have to do something. I think the fact that Rick was well thought of, he was a Notre Dame guy, that meant something to Chicago people. Ted is still there, Ted Phillips. And I remember meeting with them early on in the process, and there seemed to be interest. They were struggling to find a quarterback. We kind of had John Kitten on the shelf in Seattle, so we knew we had a guy that eventually we wanted to play. And it just worked out to where it was kind of the perfect storm. It was the Notre Dame factor, the Rick Meyer aura, and I think it was a good fit for Chicago, and it was just time that it expired for us in Seattle. So one of those deals that just comes together. There wasn't a lot of other teams involved, and so it wasn't like I was leveraging a deal somewhere else. It just happened, and we were fortunate enough to make it work, and the rest is history.
Let me ask you this. What's the one trade you most regret doing?
Oh, boy. I've been pretty lucky throughout my career to not have made too many mistakes. I regret a couple unrestricted free agent signings where we overpaid, and early in the free agent years, that was always an issue. I traded Eugene Robinson, the safety in Seattle, to Green Bay for Matt LaBounty, a defensive end who probably neither one of you fans even remember these guys, but Eugene Robinson was fairly iconic in Seattle days. He went on to play for the Carolina Panthers and play in a Super Bowl. He was a really good player for us. I'm not sure that was smart on my end. I mean, it worked out fine. We got a nice role player in Matt LaBounty back from the Packers, but that was one where we probably gave more than we got, especially when you consider the intangibles and all the leadership that Eugene had brought to us. So that was a tough one. Plus, he was well-liked. I have some regret on that one.
And Randy, before we finish up today, last question, what's the most challenging part of being an NFL GM?
I think people that hire GMs nowadays think they're hiring somebody to sit in a room and pick players. The most challenging thing is you're the communicator to everybody in the building and outside the building. So you have a lot on your plate. I always say, hey, I used to tell my assistant, try to carve out 1 hour that I can watch film today. So that's the hardest thing people don't understand. In fact, young GMs now that get jobs, when I do talk to them, they always say, give me some advice. And I say, you got to find time still to do what you do. And that's to evaluate talent. Finding time to watch tape. I'll bet if you went in Ryan Pace's office, he'd say, man, I just need some time to look at film. That's what got us into these jobs. And it seems like that's the hardest thing to hang on to once you get these jobs is that time. And you have a line outside your door in a lot of days and you never get to watch film. I remember coming home many nights and saying, what did I accomplish today? You're the communicator and communicating's hard and it takes time. So that's the biggest thing is these guys that have GM jobs now, it's not like you're a scout anymore. You just can't occupy your time watching tape. It's hard. You got to depend on others.
Well, Randy, thank you so much for joining me. Great insights, and I hope we could stay in touch and do this again soon. Best wishes, too, with all of your endeavors. The CEO of MuellerFootball.com and the host of the Football GM podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it. Anytime.